So Tom, tell me about your time in the service.
The time I was 18, I was in the service. When I got out of high school in May of 1941, this other young fellow and I, who had worked together in the field, we'd become good friends, and I wanted to go to Alaska. Well, he was a year younger, but his folks said, oh yeah, you can go. So his folks gave him $100, and my folks gave me $100, and we took off and went to Alaska. Gonna set the world on fire. Yeah. He was just 16 and I just turned 17. Well, we spent the summer and I got so homesick. I tell you, if you've never been homesick, you don't know how. It's terrible. I felt like I could have just got out on the water and walked home just to get home, you know. And one of these, I think it's one of these columns that I'm giving to you, I tell about getting home and coming in over Beaver Rim. And when we looked off the rim and saw the big wind rivers and the big expanse of country, I knew I was home. When I got back from Alaska, my folks had sold the ranch, which broke my heart, but I'd just gone off and left them. So anyway, Dad had a bunch of lots in Billings and Bozeman that his mother had bought, my grandmother. And all during the Depression, he had paid the taxes on those. So then had come the time in 1941 when he could sell them. People were wanting to buy them. So they had moved to Billings. So when I got back to Billings, I just stayed there with him, and I went the first quarter to Billings Polytechnic Institute, now called Rocky Mountain College, I think. But at any rate, I put in my first quarter there. And then come Christmas time, I told my folks I'd sure like to go to Laramie, where all my buddies are, you know, from high school. And Dad said, well, there's nothing keeping us here. Let's just all move. So we did. But on December 7th, I can remember it was a Sunday morning, we were just all kind of sitting around and eating breakfast, and then this news came, and we said, oh man. When I was in high school, junior and senior year, we had a really great history and civics teacher named Hal Ham. And even then, Hitler invaded Poland in 1939. I was either a sophomore or junior in high school. And all of us young guys then started saying, oh man, we're going to be gun fodder. So December 7th, 1941, we knew for sure. Gee whiz. And the thing about it, at those times it was just radio, because we didn't have TV. But the radio announcers were just very good, and they described in great detail about what was happening. This great huge battleship had just gone down, and the Japanese were just strafing and bombing, and oh boy. So Mom and Dad and I just said, well, it's only a matter of time. I was going to be involved in a war.
Tell me about your time at war.
After we moved to Laramie, I turned 18 in April of 1942. And so just as soon as I turned 18, I went down to the draft office and signed up, never knowing how it was going to turn out. I turned 18 in April, and in May there was an Air Corps recruiting team came through, and I told the folks, please let me sign up for Air Corps. So they did. I signed up, and I went through the training. I was sitting in a tent over in Italy. I don't know how many missions I'd already gone on. But I got the mail, and here was a notice. I was supposed to report to my draft office in Laramie. They were drafting me. I guess I should have told them. I just assumed that through all of the different things they would know, but they didn't. The guys really joshed me. They said, "Boy, you better be rushing down to that Laramie office or they'll put you in the hoosegow." I said, "Well, let them come and do it." So it was a kind of a funny sideline on that. We trained in B-24s. And part of the training, I went from my bombardier school to Boise, Idaho. And
You were a bombardier.
yes, to be a bombardier on a B-24 crew. When I got there, I met the men, all but the navigator. I met the men who I would fly with on this B-24. So we became a team. So we trained there a little bit, and then we got orders to go to Casper, Wyoming. I said, hooray!
Yeah.
By golly.
Almost home.
Yeah. I said, oh man, that'd really be nice. I can run home on a weekend. But at any rate, somewhere in the night, as we traveled through Idaho or western Wyoming, they changed the orders on us. Got up in the morning, we were going to Scottsbluff, Nebraska. Yeah. But that turned out to be kind of neat because I got to visit with my old great uncle who lived there. And so we trained at Scottsbluff and then at Langley. And then when we were at Langley, we were assigned to go, evidently, us guys who were just cogs in the wheel didn't know all of this, but our superiors did. We were to go into the 15th Air Force, which meant flying over Eastern Europe. So we picked up new B-24s, just brand spanking new at Mitchell Field, Long Island.
Wow.
They were turning them out at the rate of about 60 B-24s a day at that time, something like this. You know, when I look back and see what we did in that war, what the American people did, why we can't get together and do things like we did then. The fact that Pearl Harbor caught us flat-footed. I just saw something on TV just the other, there's a man has just come out with a new book. I think I'd kind of like to get it because we asked ourselves, what were we doing that we let the Japanese sneak up on us like that? We were just complacent. Even Roosevelt, they say now that Roosevelt had been tipped off that these things were going on and we had better start watching, but we didn't. So we were just caught flat-footed. I think we had something like 150,000 men in the U.S. Army at the time. 150,000. It was incredible. Most of our big bombers had been destroyed at Pearl Harbor. We did have B-17s, but they hadn't, the B-24 had not been put out on the line yet, but it was coming. At any rate, it's just like when we'd sit in the class up here at Hal Ham's, we'd talk about, you know, what would we do if we did get into war? Because we were not prepared. We're not prepared. And it was the same deal again. The good Republican senators just balked at trying to help Great Britain. Now, Great Britain had been in the war a couple of years by the time Pearl Harbor happened. We were not involved, except that Roosevelt had finally talked the Senate into allowing him to send goods to Britain to help maintain them. But outside of that, we hadn't done anything. And so here's most of our Navy was destroyed and much of our Air Force. And Hitler was just rolling through Europe, and the Japanese were rolling through Asia. It just looked like we were sunk. It was a terrible dilemma, a terrible thing. And you know, Roosevelt, he saw what needed to be done, and he got industrialists together and everybody else and said, now we're going to do this. You are not going to make any more cars for as long as this war is on. So there was no new cars made. You're going to make airplanes and tanks. It was just an incredible situation that didn't look, it just didn't look good at all. You know, I was trained to do that, so I kind of enjoyed the dropping of the bombs, but I didn't enjoy all that flak bursting all around us. And of course, that's what blew my eye out, was flak. I was on my 32nd mission. We were going to Vienna, Austria, and we were flying from way down in Italy, clear up across to Vienna. So that it took us about 5 hours to fly there, and another 5 to fly back. So they were long missions, and on those long missions, we were given credit for 2 missions. If they were short, we only got 1. And I had only been over enemy territory 22 times when I got hit, but I had 32 missions because of these long missions. We were to go to Vienna, and I had been promoted so that I was a lead bombardier, and it was in the works that I was being promoted from second lieutenant at the age of 19 to a first lieutenant, and I got that just as I turned 20. Oh boy. But because of what I had done on the mission when we bombed Cassino, Italy, I did something that was kind of, well, to me, I was just doing my job. But these other bombardiers really goofed, and they dropped bombs where they shouldn't have. But I went right in on the target and put my bombs right where I was told they should go, so I got promoted. I was supposed to be leading the day I got hit, but about 10 to 15 minutes out, out from the target, I decided I'd get up and look out through the Astrodome that's up on the top of the pilot and the co-pilot are just right behind me, and the front gun turret is just in front of me, and I'm looking out, and I look ahead to see what it looks like up at the target. But as I stood up and put my head into the Astrodome, which was this dome about so big around and stood about so high, my head would just fit in there so I could see out. So I got up and stood on these boxes of ammunition and looked out, and I was looking off to my right because it was kind of amazing. I was awestruck again. There was red and white flak against a blue sky. And I thought, how ironic, red, white, and blue. And about that time, I felt a hand of something move my head and crash. This big chunk of metal went past my head. I thought it had torn my ear off, so I felt for my ear first, but it was still there. Then I felt for my eye, and I thought, well, I'll never see out of it again. Well, this flak, it came from right up ahead of us and just above us, and it came down right past my head, went over my shoulder, and cut all of these hydraulic lines right behind me, so that when we came into land, we had no brakes and no flaps. And that's pretty serious. All I can remember is that I hear this. It was instantaneous, brilliant light, a hell of a sound, and then the crash as it came down and hit me. And at that point, I just dropped right down. I was evidently knocked out. When I came to, and the bombardier's compartment, the bomb site was like, well, bomb site was like right here. And this part right here was where I crumpled down into. And I always wondered, how come I didn't hit one of those sharp corners? But I didn't. I just went right down.
Wow.
And as I immediately got right up, and that's when I felt for my ear and then my eye, and I knew I was not going to see it. Because when I was a kid and Dad would butcher things, I'd help him butcher. And he'd let me cut the gallbladder out of the liver. and he'd warn me, don't cut the gallbladder because that's terrible stuff. Oh, but I'd cut that worm liver. When I put my hand to my face, I thought, oh man, that feels like chopped liver. So I knew I was not going to see again. And little pieces of plexiglass had also just hit my face, but one of them hit my left eye, right smack dab in the middle. And it was in there scratching every time I blinked, but I could see through a red haze. So that's how I was able to see things. When I got up and felt my eye, then I thought, I need to tell my crew I'm still alive, because I dropped down right out of sight, right in front of the pilot and co-pilot. And they probably thought I was dead. I never got to talk to him afterwards, so I didn't know. But at any rate, I thought, hey, I've come. I tried to call him and I couldn't get him. And I thought my line, like this one, had come undone right down here at my waist. So I looked down, and as I did, there's this great gusher of blood coming out of my head. And I thought, oh my gosh, I can't let that go on. I'll bleed to death. 5 miles up, 40 below zero. And the thing about it, the darn flak cut my, it just sheared my helmet and my earphone and my oxygen mask right off. So my oxygen mask was just flopping down here, so I wasn't getting any oxygen. But because I'd raised here at the foot of the Wind Rivers, I had high tolerance for oxygen. And so it didn't bother me that much. They even used me as a guinea pig in decompression chambers to show others what happens, you know, as you go up. At any rate, I got this deal out of the Red Cross thing, the little packet, and I found a square and I stuck it on my face and it just froze instantly. It's 40 below zero. So then I thought, oh boy, my bombs aren't gone. And so I've got to get it done. So I went back to the bomb site, but I couldn't get anything to happen. And then the bombardier had a deal up here with little lights on it that showed you if the bombs were all gone. If they weren't, you had to get in the back and lever them out. But I looked up there and it was all lit up. And I thought, oh boy, good, the pilots dropped them. When I saw the bombs were all gone, why, that was a relief to me. So I thought, well, I'll just sit down. So I did, sat down on the canister. And as I was sitting there, kind of running through my mind what had happened, I thought, oh my gosh, that was divine intervention. Had to have been, because I was looking over here at that and I just felt this move my head like that. Almost like a hand had turned my head so that I was oriented this way. Otherwise, if I'd still been looking, I wouldn't be sitting here. That flak would have hit me about here and just sheared my head off. Because there's a big chunk of flak. You knew that if the enemy drew blood, you got a Purple Heart. I knew about that, but I didn't think anything about a medal. Nothing whatsoever. Because I didn't think there was anything that I had done that would bring recognition. But the higher-ups evidently thought, my golly, that took lots of guts, lots of courage. I was in the hospital. I was in the hospital at Barrie for about 6 weeks, and then they moved me to a hospital in Naples. And it wasn't until I was in the hospital at Naples and I'd gone out for a walk somewhere, I was up and around, walking around, you know. I'd been fitted with a kind of a plastic ball for my eye, but I didn't have glasses, but I had recovered enough from that plexiglass in this eye that I could see fine. So I was walking around, so I'd been out for a walk and I came back and there was this little package about like so laying on my pillow, and I thought, I wonder what this is. I opened it up and it was a silver star.
Wow.
Oh. Well, I think my first reaction was, what did I do to deserve this? I didn't do anything. I was just doing my job.
Yeah.
So